Breaking news just into CNN. The Georgia prosecutor leading the state's election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump is now disqualified.
Donald Trump scores a massive win as District Attorney Fani Willis, who is prosecuting his RICO case in Fulton County, Georgia, has officially been disqualified from prosecuting the case. This is such a massive victory for Trump because after this ruling, he has officially beaten all of the lawfare. His mishandling classified documents case in Florida thrown out, his federal overturning an election January 6th case thrown out, his New York case, while he's been convicted, he hasn't been sentenced, and it looks like he isn't going to be sentenced because he's going to be president and is likely going to get appealed and thrown out. And now this final one in Georgia, the prosecutor has been disqualified. And while the case has not been officially dismissed, by every practical measure, this case is dead in the water too. Now let's watch CNN freaking out because their hopes and dreams of Donald Trump going to jail have officially slipped between their fingers and is no longer a possibility. Watch.
We begin this hour with breaking news just into CNN. The Georgia prosecutor leading the state's election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump is now disqualified. CNN's Caitlin Polance is here with more. Caitlin, what can you tell us about this? This is just coming in the last several minutes. This is a big development.
A big development, and a big development that Donald Trump has wanted for a long time. That case against him in Georgia, the criminal case where it's accusing him and several others of a racketeering conspiracy related to the 2020 election, it's already been paused. Now it's not even backburnered. This is a case that will be dead in the water because the Georgia Court of Appeals is now saying that Fani Willis, the leader of the prosecution against Donald Trump, the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, she should be disqualified from being able to bring that case. The Georgia Court of Appeals is saying that it's a significant appearance of impropriety caused by the conduct of a public prosecutor. That is Willis, how she behaved, how she was speaking about the case, about Trump publicly, about how she was having a relationship with the top prosecutor that was concealed in this, a man named Nathan Wade. All of that, previously, the trial level judge had looked at and said, Fani Willis can stay on this case. We're not dismissing the indictment, but the Court of Appeals is now taking another look and saying, no, the trial judge was wrong. Fani Willis should be disqualified from continuing to lead this case. It would be a long process, or it will be a long process, to replace her, which is why I say this case is dead in the water now without Fani Willis, the person who was leading this case against Donald Trump in Fulton County. And just to keep tabs on how many cases there are against Donald Trump criminally, the other two in federal court, January 6th, and classified documents, those are dismissed. And then the additional case in New York City, where he was set to be sentenced, that sentencing is now not happening. So as Donald Trump enters the presidency, each of these courts that is handling a criminal case is essentially removing that issue from him to have to deal with in any period of time in the near future.
Now, if you're asking why this case is dead in the water, even though it hasn't been dismissed, the reason is if they have to appoint a new prosecutor, which they can decide to do, it would take a long time. Essentially, all of the evidence and testimony that Fani Willis used against Donald Trump because of the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity now has to all be disregarded and thrown out. So essentially, this case would have to be built again from scratch. But due to all the improprieties about how Fani Willis hired her boyfriend, who she was sleeping with at the time, to be the lead prosecutor on the case, inflating his salary far beyond what is reasonable, and then being exposed to get kickbacks and also getting trips taken on the taxpayer dollar, this is just a shitstorm that no other prosecutor is going to want to touch or get involved with. Now, if you aren't familiar with Fani Willis, she's a really rude and snarky person, and she implicated from the beginning that this was going to be a politically motivated case. When she was running in 2022 for the DA position in Fulton County, Georgia, she explicitly said that she was going to go after and get Donald Trump. Not that she was going to prosecute criminals or do her job, but that she was going to go after Donald Trump. And a lot of the problems facing this are she was receiving federal funds for this case, and a lot of the money that was earmarked for other things like prosecuting homicides was used for this case, which then in turn were used to line her own pockets and the pockets of her boyfriend. So this case is riddled with scandals. It has been from the beginning. And there was actually a hearing from the Trump team where they highlighted all of these improprieties and political motivations, and the court deemed that either Fani Willis had to get off the case or her boyfriend had to get off the case. And they chose to kick the boyfriend off of the case, but now a new decision has been made that Fani Willis must be kicked off the case too. So if you want to get just a glimpse of how rude and obnoxious this woman is, here's a little bit from that hearing where the decision was made that either her or the boyfriend would have to get kicked off the case, and just listen to how this woman conducts herself and speaks and her tone.
When did your personal relationship with Mr. Wade end?
Our personal relationship ended in this year. So let's be very clear so that we don't mix words. I don't want to mix words in here. Mr. Wade is my friend right now. Mr. Wade, I would say, has been my friend since 2020. I think he started out as like a mentor and a professional colleague. He became my friend and somebody that I really respected. I feel very indebted to Mr. Wade for taking on the task of this job. And he is certainly my friend and one of the people that I respect the most. So if you ask about a personal relationship, I consider myself to have a personal relationship right now, Mr. Wade. I consider myself to have a personal relationship with Anna Cross. I consider myself to have a personal relationship with Mr. Abadi. I consider myself to have a personal relationship with Andrew Evans.
Okay, let me just clarify that.
I have a personal relationship with him as we speak right now. I don't think that's what you're asking. I think that's what you're asking.
When did your romantic relationship with Mr. Wade end?
Yeah, just a really snarky and insincere person. I'm really happy for Trump that he can do his job going forward for the American people without having to worry about these politically motivated attacks hanging over his head. But in other news, if you remember Trump's interview with NBC, where he was talking about the Venezuelan gangs taking over apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado, and the interviewer said, "Oh, that never happened. The police said that never happened." And Trump said, yeah, it did. We played it all the time in my campaign rally. Well, just the other day, it came out that 14 gang members from this particular apartment complex were arrested due to kidnapping, beating, and torturing 2 Americans who lived there. And the police chief came out and admitted it and scolded Biden's White House. Watch.
It was a male and a female. They were accosted by approximately 13 to 15 armed individuals. They were pistol whipped, they were beat, they were mistreated. One of the male was actually stabbed, he had a stab wound. So does that fall in the category of torture for me? Yeah, it does. There is a high assumption that they may be affiliated with the TDA gang. I had a discussion with an individual from the White House, and that occurred back on September the 23rd, I believe. And that person basically told me that, hey, once these immigrants get across the border, that's all we really care about. And to me, that's a problem.
Wow, those are powerful words. That was the police chief in Aurora, Colorado.
Just another reason why nobody trusts the mainstream media. They have a narrative that they want to shape, and they don't care about common sense or the facts as it comes to reporting on these things. And someone still needs to answer the question, what was the purpose of having an open border and allowing all these dangerous people to just come unobstructed into the country? The police chief literally said, somebody at the Biden White House that he spoke to said, all we care about is that these illegals get across the border. After that, it's your problem. So it's almost as if they knew that heinous, dangerous people would be coming in through their open border policies, yet they didn't care at all. Any policy that has the objective to destabilize the country and harm its citizens should be looked at as treason and certainly at bare minimum investigated. Now, just as a brief reminder how salacious and complicit the media is in forming this narrative that nothing was a problem, here's an interview J.D. Vance did with a reporter where she just downplays the whole Venezuelan gang taking over apartment issue by saying it's only limited to just a handful of apartment complexes. Watch.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
I don't care whether you're right or you're left-leaning in your politics. Everybody should agree that American apartment complexes getting taken over by gangs is unacceptable. We should all agree that we do not want our country descending into some third world dystopia where the rule of law is no longer a thing and the streets are just ran and terrorized by violent gangs. So for her to downplay that even a few, even though we know it's more than a few, but just to admit that a few apartment complexes have been taken over and overrun by gangs where they're charging the residents there essentially a tax, mafia style, pay us to protect you. Protect us from who? Protect you from us kind of deal is just completely despicable. And the Biden White House and the media ought to be held accountable for this kind of disregard for the American people's safety. And now the final thing I want to touch on in this video is, as you've probably heard, Congress is pissed off that their spending bill full of unnecessary stuff, including a 40% pay raise for themselves, has now been struck down by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Now, they're mad that Donald Trump, who isn't the sitting president, and Elon Musk, who doesn't really have any official position, have such influence over this piece of legislation passing when it was already agreed to by Republicans and Democrats. Now, Elon Musk didn't do anything to influence it. All he did was share the details to the public, to his followers, and let them decide if what was in this is actually reasonable. Now, we all know that politicians will have these big bills and just sneak and slide different things in there. Well, this was a 1,500-page bill that people had 19 hours to read and then vote on. Listen to Fox News highlight some of the crazy spending that was included in this bill, which is simply just to keep the government open and running. Watch. So this bill went, so this continued resolution went from a bill to keep the government open, have some aid for farmers, have some aid for disaster relief victims, to now a whole bevy of different kind of spending, including a 40% pay raise for Congress people, a new football stadium in Washington, D.C., rebuilding a bridge in Baltimore, and as they highlighted at the end, $3 million to test and investigate molasses. Now, everybody's freaking out because the government's going to shut down otherwise if this bill doesn't get passed. But that's the kind of dirty tactics and leverage that people use in order to get all of these unnecessary and extra things into the bill. You've heard the term, you don't negotiate with terrorists, right? Well, that's the same principle that they should follow now, meaning the Democrats don't get to throw whatever they want into this bill. Otherwise, the government is going to shut down and it's going to cause hardship for a lot of people. They want you to be more sympathetic to that and allow them to get whatever they want as a result. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. These are crazy times that we're living in. January 20th is just a month away. Then Trump will officially take office and things can finally start moving in a positive direction. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Turn on those notification bells so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one.